When you have a fever or when you have a headache, are you the same person you are that when you are, in a sense, physiologically feeling better? So we can see in broad strokes that disruptions of our physiology disrupt or bias how we react and literally not only react to the world, how we broadcast ourselves to the world.
Hi, I'm Jules, and the following is a recording of an interview that we had the honor of doing with Dr. Stephen Porges. Dr. Stephen Porges is a leading world-renowned expert on what it means to be human and also the human experience around trauma, great loss, and challenges. While speaking with us, Dr. Porges goes into detail on what actually happens in our physical body when we experience great changes, great loss, and very, very, very traumatic events. And also, we offer what we can do about it, how we can help ourselves and how we can nurture ourselves during this very difficult time. I live on the Big Island, and on August 8th, just an island away, great loss, great traumatic events began to happen. The wildfires of Maui. I didn't know what I could do. So I asked myself, what could I do? What could I do in this present moment? So I reached out to my teacher, my mentor, my kumu, Dr. Stephen Porges, on a Saturday, no less. And 10 minutes later, he responded. He responded as soon as he knew that he could provide help for Maui. He could provide help during this traumatic time. And he scheduled in his busy schedule as he's reshaping psychology as we know it. The following Monday, we recorded this interview because I knew if he could explain what is going on in our human experience during these times and how we can nurture and how we can comfort ourselves and other people during this time. And if we could get this recorded and shared with the world, it will help so much. One thing I want to express is you beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people of Lahaina and Maui, you have the traditions of your ancestors ingrained in you. And because of this very fact, I reached out to Dr. Kalehua Krug, who so generously recorded an Oli for this video. The Oli is for inspiration, growth, and healing. The actions of the Oli, the Mele, and the Hula are more than just a theatrical show. There is something deeper that's going on, that's healing, that we now, with Dr. Stephen Porges' work, he has the science to back up what your ancestors already knew. For the millennia, they knew the importance of the Oli. They knew the importance of the Mele. They knew the importance of the breath of life. And that's exactly why I called Dr. Porges, because he can explain that. And together with my husband and my business partner and Dr. Stephen Porges, we want to explain this on a scientific level, but also reminding each and every one of you that you have exactly what you need inside of you. Exactly what you need inside of you. There's a deep knowing that rests there. It's subtle, but it's there. And together, I hope that we can bring this to the surface. On a second and equally important note, another reason we're doing this video and this interview is an effort to bring funds to the people of Lahaina, the people of Maui, Kula, bypassing all the red tape. It's the nicest way I can say it. This was the most difficult part, is finding a good source. Mahalo to Kamalini for reaching out and introducing me to Help Maui Rise. Help Maui Rise was originated by 3 beautiful humans, Kenna, Gabby, and Sam.
The Help Maui Rise list helps donors give cash directly to victims rather than a large nonprofit or general fund. It also promotes more equitable donation distribution.
We were talking to a lot of families that needed money immediately and they weren't getting it. And a lot of them 1 month in have still not received that aid.
Help Maui Rise highlights some of the heartbreaking stories on social media.
they were like a family that did try really hard to find that money, and they just like couldn't figure it out, and they weren't qualifying for a lot of the aid that was being offered. They were getting denied FEMA assistance. And there are a lot of families that are in that like same situation that really need people to just show up for them.
Survivors can submit their information to get on the list. Reed says 90% of submissions are real, and GoFundMe helps vet the rest.
They're going through trauma. We just want to find a way to lessen all of that pain for them.
If Hawaii, if Maui meant something to you, anything, if it ignites something deep within your heart, then donate $10 to these beautiful girls. And this video is also an effort to support their amazing work. So coming up, please listen to this amazing interview with Dr. Stephen Porges. He explains in detail what arises in your physical body when you're experiencing extreme loss, trauma, and great challenges, but also how to move through these extreme losses, extreme trauma, and extreme challenges. Thank you.
So today, we'd like to welcome Dr. Stephen Porges, PhD, or Steve. He is a distinguished university scientist at Indiana University, where he's the founding director of the Traumatic Stress Research Consortium. He's professor of psychiatry at the University of North Carolina and professor emeritus at both the University of Illinois at Chicago and the University of Maryland. He served as president of the Society for Psychophysiological Research and the Federation of Associations in Behavioral and Brain Sciences, and is a former recipient of a National Institute of Mental Health Research Science Development Award. He has published more than 400 peer-reviewed papers across several disciplines, of which you won't even name because there's so many. And he's also the author of the Polyvagal Theory, which we're going to be talking about shortly. So, Steve, it is a real honor, and thank you so much for being with us. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you for welcoming me into your community. Thanks.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, if you don't know who we are, my name's Rudy.
I'm Jules.
And we are human potential and spiritual wholeness facilitators. And we coined the term wholality, which looks into a wholeness of being. There's quite a big community who feels that experience is completely 100% thought created, feeling like you're feeling because you're thinking like you're thinking. It's just your thinking. It's very cognitive centric. From your perspective, what would you say around that?
Well, I would say it's a limited perspective of reality, of people's true experiences. And there are things people, when their physiology is disruptive, meaning not supporting its health, growth, and restoration or homeostatic functions, our behavior tends to reflect feelings of, let's say, lack of safety and a lower threshold to react to others, or irritability, you would call it. And when our body is really quite calm, we have great flexibility and resilience. What I would say to someone is, if you have a stomach ache, how social are you? How loving and how engaging, how accepting are you of other people? And so when you have a fever or when you have a headache, are you the same person you are that when you are, in a sense, physiologically feeling better? So we can see in broad strokes that disruptions of our physiology disrupt or bias how we react and literally not only react to the world, how we broadcast ourselves to the world, in tone of our voice, in the intonation of how we're speaking, and functionally in terms of our accessibilities to others. So when we don't feel good, we are broadcasting, basically, stay away from me, because, and I'm throwing cues of threat at you. I'm not an accessible human being. So we want to really be real careful in saying, yeah, intentionality and top-down cognitive thought is very important, but the foundational survival mechanisms of our nervous system are very low in the brain and are at times difficult to intentionally manage. So the other retort to people who would say that is, have you ever been angry? And
Right.
And let's say you've been angry and you say, I don't want to be angry. How effective has that been? Or you're suffering a loss like a grief or a serious breakup in a relationship, or I would say something very powerful, like a violation of trust with another person. What does your body do? Those are basically profound signals of threat to our physiology. And we can't say, oh, I understand that. And I'm just fine. You're not just fine. Your body is in a state of threat, and you have to become aware of that. And as you become aware of it, you learn how to manage those physiological states without getting mad at yourself, without feeling blame and shame, but with understanding what your body is doing and trying to do for you. And what happens is when the body does that, what most people do is they try to numb out so that they are who they think they want to be. And that is a person that is really a big brain with only cognition on a body that is basically automatically taking care of you without understanding that that body to take care of you interprets sociality as nourishment. So we have a biological need to co-regulate with one another, literally to calm each other. And that's the history of humanity. And I'll move it even once, give you another metaphor. Maybe we can use it as a metaphor. How do you deal with your pets? And let's say you got a new pet into the house. Do you think that pet has a physiological state that is sensitive to the cues that you are demonstrating to that or engaging that animal with? So you engage it gently. You use a prosodic, melodic voice. It's just like what a mother does with a baby, and hopefully fathers will do that too. But when we deal with pets, we know universally that intonation of our voice and gentleness of approach literally triggers the physiology of that pet into calming down. And then the pet can, when it's calm and feels safe, can engage the human in a pro-social way. So pet mammals are actually good tools, or let's say companions for neural exercises of how to regulate our physiology so that we're not, in a sense, driven by our physiology. And so this notion is that we need to be aware of our physiology, we need to respect it, we need to honor it, and then with that knowledge of it, we can basically learn to navigate with it, as opposed to get angry with it, suppress it, and literally numb out. And the final point is that the act of trying to numb out, which is really literally the process, what it is to be a socialized human being in Western society, is not to feel your body, has a consequence. You're turning off the neural feedback loops that, in a sense, enable your body to do what it's supposed to do. So we end up getting all these, quote, psychosomatic or psychogenic illnesses, or functional illnesses, or medically unexplained symptoms. And the easiest one to identify, which can be shared by so many people, is gut problems. It's not something wrong with your gut. It's that your nervous system has detected signals of threat in the environment, and the gut reactions are the adaptive ones of a body under threat.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you. Love that. I love listening to you. So I was wondering if you could go over the key tenets of your polyvagal theory. And
in general, they're embedded in what I was saying. The first thing is that our physiological state sits in between the external part of our life and our reactions to that. So again, if we live in a behavioral world, we think that stimulus produces response. In part, that's correct, but there's something in between that that's a modifier of how that stimulus disrupts us or doesn't. And we would call that, oh, you're a flexible person, or you are just, any change and you just lose it. The point is that the physiological state is literally a transformer, transducer of whether we take things with flexibility or we are highly reactive to it. So that's the first point. The point is that in between the stimulus and the response is a physiology regulated by a nervous system. And that nervous system, this is the second point, that nervous system can trigger the physiology to be in one of three broad states. One is, I'm calm, I'm a safe individual. And another one would be, I am in a mobilized state, I need the energy for fight or flight. And the third one is, it's impending doom, I'm going to die, and the only way out is to disappear, and I shut down or pass out or defecate. Now, all these experiences do exist, but in general, we mix and match these three systems so that as long as we keep that social system on board, we can mobilize, and we call it play. So we smile and run, but we're still running. And it's not like fight flight, it's something different. It's enjoyable. Then we can shut down with that social system, and now we're safe in the arms of a person we trust. We call that moments of intimacy. It doesn't mean sexuality, it just means our bodies are safe enough to give up reactions or defense reactions so that we can just feel calm enough. And when you have babies and children, you realize, or any individual who's ill, what do you want that individual to do? You want that individual to feel calm so that the body can do its own restorative functions. It can heal itself. And in general, with children, it's not just healing. We want the baby to grow. And if the baby's under a state of chronic threat, it's going to interfere with growth.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. So
those are the first, those are the first two. Sorry about that. So we were basically saying that the sociality, and the take home I want you to, your listeners to get, is that there is this linkage that occurred through evolution that changed how the mammalian autonomic nervous system was different than those that came before mammals, the ancient extinct reptiles. The mammals, all nervous systems of virtually every living organism has this ability to react to threat. But mammals have something else. They have this ability to inhibit reactions of threat. And how do they do that? With signals of safety. And the mother with the crying baby reflexively knows what that is. Gentleness, intonation of voice. These are signals that our nervous system can't refuse and needs to respond to. And that's why under periods of severe disruption, let's just say like what's gone on in Maui, the body craves to be around others who broadcast signals of safety and trust so that they can give up that threat of the feelings of impending doom, that they feel that they're safe enough to close their eyes and feel the comfort of being in someone else's arms.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So in a sense, where you get various quotes like, it's not what's happening to you, it's how you react to it. What you're really proposing and actually proven with lots of research journals is that people, the cognitive centric model is kind of missing the body in that whole scenario.
Yeah, we always have to be, remember, from a polyvagal perspective, we don't want to broadcast signals of threat to others. So if someone is listening who has a cognitive centric worldview, we don't want to dispel cognitive centric functions. We want to say it's limited. And the issue is we can talk about kids in school that are really underperformers, might be the educational term, or difficult children in the classroom. They often have behavioral state regulation problems, and it's not intentional. Their bodies are under basically a state of threat, and they can't calm down. And not being in that physiological state of calmness contradicts the ability or inhibits the ability to process information. So they appear to be less smart. They tend to be underperformers or underachievers. But in reality, they're doing the best they can in a physical situation that is loaded with triggers that puts their bodies into states of threat. So the intervention is, can you retune that body's nervous system with signals of safety? And in a cognitive centric world, it goes in a different way. It says the reason you're disruptive is that you haven't taken control. You haven't used the top-down mechanisms and, in a sense, blame the victim. So blaming the person who has these weaker systems or who has more powerful bottom-up feelings, perhaps coming out of homes that were under severe threat and not having the ability to feel safe in social settings. And we're trying to blame them for not feeling safe. Right. And by not feeling safe, blaming them is really broadcasting cues of threat. And of course, it doesn't work. So the idea is we have to understand that those physiological states are disruptors, and they provide a portal for intervention, which is different than rewards and punishments, or basically screaming at someone. It's not going to work.
Right.
Wow, so true.
Beautiful. This is going to go into the third one. Honoring our whole experience. I want to talk about what I was told in the past, that nothing outside of me can make me feel like I do. Nothing. It's all my thinking about what's outside of me. And I know that there was something bubbling up. And I was wondering if you could explain that. You're amazing.
We have to balance. Yeah, we have to balance things. And that is, there's a lot that generates within ourselves. We daydream, we have images. In fact, the world of trauma, to me, has taught me what it is to be a human being. Because what people who have experienced severe adversity tell me, they basically tell me what it is to be human, meaning they describe what they've lost. They've lost their ability to feel safe in the presence of others. Now, it's not, they haven't lost the intention. They want to have relationships, they want to be hugged, but when they start to get in close proximity with people, their body reacts, repels. And in fact, in the world that we're all in, we know people who can give us good hugs and other people who are totally rigid. And when a body goes rigid with a hug, it's that nervous system telling you, the person who is receiving that the other person really is not in a state that should be hugged. They shouldn't be doing that. And they're using that cognitive centric one, saying it's socially acceptable. My body may be in a state of threat, but you know what? I'm going to give someone a hug. But the body will convey that fear in its rigidity. And so, of course, what we would want is that the body needs to go through basic learning strategies, which it does. Like we learn to, the body's conditionable on many levels. So there are strategies called titration or pendulation, where you do a little or with proximity until your body feels safe. And then you get closer and you investigate those bodily feelings.
Right.
So it's not that we're cognitive centric and we appreciate our mind and how we think. We are subjugating the visceral feedback that our body is giving our brain. And we're not acknowledging that bidirectionality between the brain and the body helps us stay healthy. It's a bidirectional superhighway of neuroregulation of our organs. So as we reject those bodily feelings, those feedback loops get dampened, and guess what? We start getting illnesses. And the illnesses are autonomic illnesses, the illnesses of the gut. In fact, the profile is really very predictable. It's so predictable that people call it functional disorders because they can't find the disorder at the level of the organ. So like when you have irritable bowel syndrome, or now they call it irritable bowel disease, the damage or the problem is not at the level of the colon. It's not at the level of the lower gut. It's at the level of the nervous system regulating that gut. And that nervous system is sending signals that the body's under a state of great threat.
Right. By my specialist, because I had a cardiologist, a urologist, a gastroenterologist, a neurologist, and I was very compartmentalized. And it was, and then when I found you, I was like, oh my gosh, this
makes sense.
Yes, it makes so much sense.
Well, this is so. When Rudy said, I had been published in many disciplines, I've been, let's say, very privileged to have crossed so many disciplines. It's enabled me to understand the language of these disciplines. It's a language that not the consumer isn't privileged to interpret. So from my perspective, I see commonality across these disciplines, common neural mechanisms. That's not what they're taught. So they're doing with the best intention, I would say usually the best intention, to try to enable their patients to do better. And they don't have a conceptualization of a more systemic defense reaction of the body. They see it as very local to the organ that they have been trained to treat. But you can start seeing that the history of clinical cases, in fact, the asking on a clinical level, whether a physician asks the question about adversity history is rare.
Yeah.
And yet adversity history gets manifested in so many of these health issues, including those that have been viewed as, let's say, psychogenic, like addiction. They're often tightly linked to adversity histories.
Right.
So the body, with adversity history, the underlying neural regulation of all the organs is really disrupted because the body literally learned to reside in a state of threat. And it makes practical sense. But the intervention has been, well, let's fix the organ that is disrupted, rather than say, let's teach the nervous system that it's not under adversity.
Yeah, beautiful. I saw a conversation with you and Dr. Gabor Mate, where you were bringing this understanding, the polyvagal theory, hopefully into the medical schools.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, it's been an objective. We've been trying to do that. We're trying to get people who are academic physicians and have an interest in polyvagal theory to try to develop course materials. In a few universities, they're starting to do that, but it's very difficult to shift paradigm. And the paradigm is in a polyvagal world is that context is extraordinarily important, because the context is loaded with signals to our nervous system. And if we can signal the nervous system that it's safe, the nervous system can then be a collaborator in healing, in a shared journey of healing. But the medical model is really a model in which medicine, meaning both drug, pharmaceuticals, and surgery, can fix the things that are broken. And in part, for some of these things, it can. And for many things, it works very well for acute disruption. But when we start talking about chronic disease, chronic pain, these are real issues. And chronicity of these clinical symptoms often result in no identifiable cause. So in the medical community, often people with these symptoms are really treated without any compassion. They're treated as if they are malingering, they're creating the problem, and sent to psychiatrists, who then want to give them pharmaceuticals so that they don't complain as much. So they get into this kind of circuit, as opposed to listening carefully. And I'm going to say, in this, listening with a polyvagal ear. So this is being polyvagal attuned, where you're seeing that the body with all these symptoms is screaming at the clinician that that individual is physiologically in profound state of threat, and it's not intentional, and it's not a disorder yet of tissue or organ damage, but it will get to that level if it continues.
Right. Absolutely. That's what happened with me.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I can think of different people who've got all kind of things happening, and there's no perceivable cause. And I can see, when I look at them, I can see that they're kind of, they're rolled up, they're stressed, they feel under threat. So that makes a lot of sense. Steve, I don't know what the correct percentage is, but I've read a few places that some say 80, other people say 95. So let's say 80% of information comes from the body to the brain, rather than the cognition to the body. Well, I don't know your take on that.
That information is really talking about at least I think they're referring to what the vagus does. The vagus has about 80% afferent, meaning sensory fibers, going upward to the brain, and about 10-20% going from the brain to different organs. And remember, the vagus is literally your surveillance system of your internal part of your body. So that is what I think is occurring in those statements. That's important to realize, that the sensory part of this massive nerve is affecting, goes to the brainstem, and the brainstem creates those foundational states in which your higher cortex functions. So if the foundational states say your body's under threat, it turns off literally the portals to higher cortical functioning. So you just don't have those portals available to you. Literally, the portals get turned off because they're telling the higher brain that the higher brain's responsibility now is to find a way out. So it's a different type of problem solution. It's not academic. It's saying, get the hell out of this environment, find a way out, run, fight, hide, do something else, disappear. So it's really sending information for the quote conscious intelligent brain to come up with strategies to deal with the threats.
So neuroception.
Okay, so neuroception, so we've discussed the fact that there are these three major states, but how do we get into them? If we're in a cognitive centric world, we say, well, I need to be calm. I'm calm. And we know that when people are depressed or when they're anxious, we tell them, stop, you don't need to be anxious, you don't need to be depressed. Does it work? So we know that the voluntary top-down doesn't change our states very effectively. So I had to postulate a different mechanism. And the mechanism I called was neuroception. And the simple one that you all know about is literally, there's actually two similar ones. One is startle. Someone comes up and you don't expect them, and your body basically goes into a massive physiological state of fight flight. Also, like you could have pain. You could be touch something and it can hurt. You don't know what you touched. So like with startles and certain aspects of pain, your ability to describe what the stimulus is extraordinarily weak, but your body's response to it is very rapid and very powerful. So we learned two things from that example. We learned that it's not conscious. We can't stop a neuroception, once it's going, and we don't debate whether it is good to react or not. It's out of our control. And second, it triggers something called interoception. Our body reacts, but now we become aware of that bodily reaction. And it's what we make of that bodily reaction that is critical in our lives and in our therapeutic journeys. Because if we think of our body reacting as literally a curiosity and say, oh, wow, look what happened to my body, then you can literally kind of study. It's like, I'm on a roller coaster. Wow. I'm not jumping out of a 10-story building, but the visceral reaction is similar. But now I'm able to explore the physiological reaction of jumping out of a window. But I'm not going to get hurt. So now we can have experiences of exploration, knowing that we're safe. And in a way, neuroception enables us to explore the range of human experiences or feelings, as long as we create the context of sufficient safety. Now, the interesting part, I would say the most interesting part about neuroception, is that there are signals of safety that turn off our threat reactions. And this makes mammals functionally huggable. It's like, what is it that's different between a reptile and a mammal? One you can give a hug to, and it's going to be reciprocal and appreciated, we hope. And the issue is, the fact is that we have this neuroception of signals of safety, which basically reframe the whole context into a state now that promotes calmness. So we talk, it's the baby who's crying. The baby who's crying, it could be very irritable, very destabilized, very aggressive, and a few words from the mother, a smile, a gentle caress, and suddenly the baby is calm. Now, is there magic to it? Yeah, well, basically there is magic, and the magic is all mammals, and especially let's talk about social mammals like humans, the maternal sounds have the ability to signal safety. And it's interesting, you can take different mammals and look at the physics of their middle ear structures, and it will teach you what frequency band you need to use for the different mammals to calm them down. So like horses, dogs, cats, and humans basically have overlapping frequencies of this band, what I call a frequency band of social communication. But whales and elephants, hey, it's really out there. And the small rodents like mice and voles and rats, they're ultrasounds to us, but they're audible to them because the physics, the size of those middle ear structures. So we evolved a portal where it starts with maternal signaling of safety to the offspring. And that neuroception just kind of shifts physiological state. But there's another component that we really haven't discussed much, and that is, what do babies do to calm? They nurse, they suckle. What do humans, or let's say adults, like to do? They like to ingest. They use ingestion, drinking, ingestion as a way of socializing, because the neural regulation of sucking, swallowing, and coordinating it with talking and breathing is the same nervous system that we use for social engagement, same nerves for smiling and for vocalizing. So we find actually in the literature that certain children who have developmental disabilities often have sucking reflex anomalies. And those individuals, as they develop there are other symptoms of those anomalies that result in difficulty with social behavior. So this becomes part of this whole route. And then if you're a therapist, you realize that there are a lot of people with eating disorders. They're really talking about dependence on ingestion for self-regulation and not ingestion as a social behavior or sociality in place of ingestion. So my hint for all that is, eat with people, you'll eat a lot less.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is it okay to move on to the Hawaiian practices?
Yeah, that's actually my agenda. My agenda is to kind of be helpful on that.
Well, I wanted to premise it with that this beautiful tradition, these cultural traditions have been around for thousands of years, and they're so healing. And like you've said, you know, the polyvagal theory, or I'm going to misquote you, it isn't anything new, because these cultures have been doing it. Because I remember somebody said, "Oh my gosh, I learned so much." No, it's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
You know, it's embedded in there. And so my Hanai sister, Maggie Kahoialua, and my Hanai daughter, Arashiro, Sunny Arashiro, who lives right next door, helped me with the pronunciation. But Maggie brought what this tradition is when somebody is experiencing change, when there's change, to honor that change. I'm going to get emotional. It's transitioning to new spaces, and it's the ki pai pai is how you say it. Ki pai pai. Ki means direct and focused energy, and pai is to reach shore or land. And what this does is it anchors the relationship of spirit to its new environment. And during this is so beautiful. During this, there's a 10-day kapu. And this is a cleansing. And in the cleansing, there's mele and ole. And those are chants and singing. And ole is chant that was not danced to. So there's a lot of elongated breath in the chanting. There's a lot of everything. Even the word patient in Hawaiian is ahuanui, and it means great breath. And one more thing, and the ha is the breath of life, and of course the honi is to share that breath, like forehead to forehead, and you share a breath. And it's so beautiful. And so when I saw you talking to Gabor, everything that you were saying, it's like the gates just opened, and they have everything they need, and they've been doing it for culture for thousands of years, embedded into their cultures. And it's just, I was wondering if you could speak about the healing of the breath.
Let's start off with basically an acknowledgement that knowledge exists, and that humans have been a very intelligent, gifted species for millennia. and not that our current state is the only state of awareness of what it is to be a human. So I would say part of what I love to do in terms of one of my passions is the deconstruction of traditions, really from prehistory or as ancient as they can get, because they're unencumbered by a lot of more modern terminology and constructs. So the emphasis on what you're saying, there are two important points. One is the breath, the other is connection. The breath part is really that as you extend duration of exhalation, you allow the vagus to do its job to calm you down. So the great breath is really an invitation to the vagus to calm your entire body and to set the stage for physiological healing and to set the stage for the body being in a state of homeostasis upon which feelings of safety can now coexist or emerge from. And then problem solving, emotionality, I'm going to say even spirituality can now emerge from a body that is not under chronic threat. So when we're not under threat, we have the capacity to connect with others, which is part of this tradition. And we have the capacity to connect with other attributes of what it is to be a human. It could be spirituality. It could be, it's all personal. That occurs as well, because we're no longer hyper vigilant about someone coming up behind us and disrupting us and criticizing us and evaluating us. We're allowing ourselves to be who we are. So that becomes really important. The issue is we are a species that needs to feel safe, and when feeling safe also feels connected with others. It's an interesting attribute because our ability to connect, to feel connected, is truly a biological imperative for being a human. We need that connection or we will not survive. It's not even thrive. We won't survive. So our need for safety in the relationship with others is what it is to be a human. And that's why I said the survivors of severe adversity have taught me really the essence of what it is to be a human. And the essence is to be able to be safe enough in one's body to feel connected with another.
Right. Beautiful.
So when we're not feeling safe, then it's obviously very hard to connect and have that social interaction.
Right. Like right now.
Well, let's blatantly say, if we don't feel safe, we don't have that option.
Right.
So it requires someone in the mix to feel safe enough to offer signals of safety that the person who doesn't feel safe can trust and give up their defenses.
Right.
So it's really, it's like we used to use terms like the adult in the room. I think you may have heard those terms when you try to kind of humiliate someone with their acting or reacting. Where's the adult in the room? The issue is we need the adult. The adult in the room is that metaphor of the parent or the father or whatever we want to use, whatever the metaphors in our sense of our self as humans is. It's a parental protection that we're seeking. But that parental protection doesn't need to be a parent. It needs to be a trusted other. And for some people, that trusted other is the family dog. It's the horse. It's kind of interesting how people, I would say social mammals, have adjusted to very challenging situations by connecting with other social mammals.
Absolutely.
Wow. It's very compassionate. I just love this.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what I want to focus on is the devastation.
Take a look at the pictures. These can really show you what happened far better than any number or statistic can. The fire destroyed the town of Lahaina. You can see hundreds of homes gone. The shops and restaurants the people who live in Lahaina depended on for jobs also gone.
Because to me, first of all, I'm quite familiar with the town. I've been there maybe 10 times. and it's always been charming and always been kind of a wonderland, and I kind of like Maui, and I've been on the Big Island as well, and I've been to Kauai and also Oahu. So Hawaii, I understand. Maui is kind of like this enchanted place. It kind of always felt wonderful. But what I realized when I look at those pictures and look at literally devastation, it's basically vacant land,
Yeah.
and it doesn't. It's like looking at the aftermath of an atomic bomb
Right.
of Hiroshima or something like that, because there's nothing really there to anchor other than the banyan tree. And the whole part of this is the community that was there had a lot of things to anchor. The property, the buildings, many of them were quite old. There were landmarks, the little museum there. But I still remember the banyan tree and the
Yeah.
art fair around it. And I actually have some stuff that I purchased from there. Um,
Mm.
and in a sense, the relaxed nature of the culture, and realizing that you don't, when they say that we're going to rebuild it, you don't rebuild that. That's a scar, and I don't really know, other than sharing with people shared loss, and offering myself as someone who's saying, I understand, and
Yeah.
there is pain, and the pain dissipates through feelings of connection, and basically realizing that we are humans and we co-regulate when we're in pain, meaning we have others that we need to come around. And
Right.
what you were talking about, the ancient traditions were very understanding about grief, far more than the modern world is. With grief, people say, well, 6 months, you'll be fine. Go out and start dating if you
Right.
lost a spouse. It's disrespectful of that person's body
Yeah.
and duration of it. I asked the question about grieving because I actually think what's going to go on in Maui is going to be grieving. Not merely there's a lot of death in that very small area, which
Yeah.
means that everyone who lived there is going to be affected by someone very close to them.
Yeah.
And it's going to have this kind of memories and a disaster, and they have no place to go where they would feel safe. And
Right.
that is really where the issue is how do people who are literally displaced under this type of setting, how do they create microcosms of literally cells of safety, and where they feel safe enough to literally allow the defenses that have been triggered by this horrible trauma. And
Right.
in my own mind, I was visualizing it because I was thinking of myself in that type of setting, and what would I do in that setting? And I tend to have this kind of like uh, perception of the world that if you are patient, everything will work out. Now, in the case of what happened there, is being patient wouldn't work out. So when
Right.
I flash back into this, putting myself in that setting, I'm one that didn't make it. So that's
Mm.
how and I feel that in a sense a little bit of a terror, because my strategy in life is get the information, make the decisions, basically a very strategic and not really rapid reaction.
Right.
And it's a very complicated thing. So what I would like people to do, and I think you really hit on the clue, is vested or embedded in the ancient traditions of the Hawaiians are
Yes.
practices that deal with these things. I think you are absolutely on board with that. And I think the community needs to realize that the toolkit is not from, I'm going to say, not from people like me. The toolkit is from the elders, is from people who
Yes.
carry with them traditions of safety, of caring of others without with the only return gift is that others do better. So I like to use this term, what is the gift that what is the only gift that you can really give to another person? And it's the gift of accessibility. And when
Mm.
you are accessible, what do you get back? the other person's accessible as well. You get the gift of accessibility coming back many-fold. And I think the natives, in terms of their own tradition, understood that accessibility was the only way to create the necessary co-regulation or community regulation that will enable people to deal with this type of hardship and trauma.
Yeah, beautiful.
Wow.
It's devastating, and I can see. And when I talk, because my counterpart, I guess, if you will, they're boots on the ground, they're Maui Brewing Company, and they're there. They opened up this storeroom, and they're just receiving supplies and making their way as best they can to Lahaina and even the upcountry in Kula, but making their way there with supplies and everything that's needed. And I can see via, when she calls me, I can see via the images that it's unrecognizable. And I can, and I know what my senses, my inner bodily senses are just looking at it and just talking to her. I couldn't imagine, being there. And it's really devastating. There's lots of lives that have been lost, and we're still counting, but also people have taken their lives afterwards.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
And so I just want to say that you beautiful, beautiful culture, that you have everything. You have this beautiful toolkit embedded into your culture. The mele and the ole. Don't ever forget that. Don't. That's so important. And I wanted you here, Dr. Porges, so you could back that up with the science. And in Dr. Porges' words, he goes, it isn't new. These cultures have been doing this for thousands of years. And the shift of the inner sensation of the body tells you that it's deeper than just a theatrical dance. It's deeper. It's what it means to be human.
There's a reason why people dance. There's a reason there's a kindred spirit. There's a reason that there's breathing in these cultures. And in a sense, going back to the roots, the essence of that can be very, very healing for people who are suffering from that devastation.
ulu ya makoa kanikoa palalau hala kolopupu ahau makaiole alele amama wano alele vale.
So I was in New Zealand, which in February, which of course is Polynesian as well. And of course, they have their own dance, the Haka. And I was having basically discussions with them of deconstructing the Haka from a polyvagal perspective. And of course, it has a lot to do with movement and facial expressivity and groundedness. I mean, you think of it merely as a threat, a dance of threat, and for warfare, but it's far more than that. The actual body movements, the tongue extrusion, the facial, the eye rolling, the fluttering with the hands, these are all profound neurophysiological exercises of the nervous system. And I was talking to a psychologist, a person working actually on her PhD of the Maori community, and I'm trying to encourage her to do that as her dissertation. So it's like there's so much to learn from what is already out there. And even going back and looking at the hula, you realize that there was an ancient mandate that you had to do it exactly the way it was. So there was no variation. In fact, penalty of death, I believe, if it wasn't done correctly. I think that's a hint that there are certain things embedded in the dance itself that tell a story, not merely of the history of the people, but also of a neuroregulatory system of maintaining and supporting health.
Yeah, beautiful.
Wow, it's amazing. I find it amazing that all these cultures all over the world have got their own versions of this, but fundamentally those indigenous cultures have kind of known, they may not have the science or biology of it, but they intuitively know what to do to get over loss, to cope with trauma,
Yeah.
to deal with uncertainty. It's all within their cultural activities. It's just, it just blows me away.
It's a knowing without knowing. How do you know? That's the only.
Well, going back to the hula, there's a lot of sacral movement in it, which is very important in terms of afferent feedback loops. So we don't, I mean, we can think of these things as having certain gestures that may be interesting, but they're triggering neural feedback loops. Likewise, the sounds and the singing and the facial expressions used are also telling you a lot about the insights of these cultures into shifting physiological states.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. This was yeah. I just am so excited. I'm sorry. Oh, but we'll have to cut this out. But my higher cortical functions have gone offline. I'm so excited that you're here. That's a blend? That's a blend because it isn't mobilization with fear. Because I'm not fearful.
It's exuberance. It's the word See, when we get stuck sympathetic is not a bad system.
Right.
It gives us all the energy, it's exuberance, but look at your face. Your face is glowing and you're smiling. So we know your social engagement system is there. And this is really what we love. We want the top smiling and the body moving. It is really that's what we call play. That's playfulness.
Okay,
that's
good.
exuberance. And I will tell you, it's also attractiveness.
Yes, very much
So
so.
yeah, because this is not so. In our Western world, the supermodels are faces flat and noses tilted upward. It's really this. The supermodels do this, and of course, if you find out about the history of the supermodels, you learn that their lives are not very nice.
No.
It's loaded with lots of trauma, adversity.
Right.
So the point is, what we idolize as beauty, our bodies don't really accept that. Our bodies like the dynamics. We like the movement. We like the facial expressivity. We like the intonation, and we like proximity.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, so we've been asking you some questions here. Is there anything you might want to take a moment, but is there anything you want to say specifically about this topic or to the people going through?
Or to Maui,
Yeah.
to Hawaii.
Yeah, I do, because I've had these experiences talking to therapists in Ukraine, Turkey, and Syria. And what I learned from them is they have been disrupted by what's going on in their world, and they tend not to want to take the time to acknowledge that their own bodies have been triggered into states of threat, because they think their responsibility is to others, and they have to, in a sense, create strategies. And so, like in Maui, and probably extended through the Hawaiian Islands, there's always going to be relationships about what's happened there, is that there's going to be a lot of, let's say, psychological distress occurring about that. And therapists are going to feel burnt out or under threat themselves, and they need to develop strategies of co-regulating with their colleagues, so that they have to understand, yes, they have responsibility for others, but they can't be helpful unless their physiology is in a state of sufficient calmness to broadcast to their clients that they are safe enough to be trusted. And so that they need to really do self-care, self-compassion, and to co-regulate with their colleagues. I think people have to acknowledge, listen, we're all human. I think that's the take-home word. We're all human, and threat affects us, all of us, and we are not, and it's not shameful to acknowledge that threat has disrupted us. And I think that's the bottom line. And when it disrupts us, we have to be aware of it and we have to build strategies to recover. And those strategies have to include others who are trusted individuals with whom we can go regulate.
Right. One of the biggest gifts
Wow.
with that is story follows state.
Yeah.
Story follows inner physiological state. That has helped so much because I stopped defining myself with my story and knew that it was pointing to something deep.
Yeah. So that's Deb Dana's interpretation.
Okay, it's
and
hers.
my simple words are basically we try to develop meaning from what we're feeling.
Right.
And that's who we are as a species. We try to make sense of it. Now, we can call that meaning making a story, but really we feel that we can't just leave the feeling without having a meaning to it. And what appropriate mental health growth and healing requires is that we separate the meaning from the feeling. The feeling, we have to experience the feeling without labeling it. Because if we start to create meaning from it, we lose what's going on. We, in a sense, justify it. So let's say you're disrupted and you get angry at your spouse, which is frequent in the world we live in, that people will misread a cue if their bodies they had a bad day, something happened to them. And when you misread the cue from your spouse, suddenly you have the privilege of acting out because you've been insulted or you did something wrong. You are justified in your own meaning making of that event. But if you felt your own body and said, when I went into that physiological state, the person across the table from me suddenly looked to me as if they were angry at me, and maybe they really weren't.
Yeah.
And so I was on a podcast recently where a person said they were in an airplane and they were in turbulence and they were listening to a podcast in which I was talking. And they said that usually when they listen to me, they feel very relaxed. But when the plane went into turbulence, my voice sounded to them more aggressive. It was very interesting. So like going through suddenly the voice to them shifted in their meaning of my voice, which was the same throughout the whole podcast. But to them, they had a physiological state that biased their interpretation. So we have to understand that, that was how they perceived it on that level of perception. But level of perception is a high level cognitive process. Neuroception is very, very low.
Yeah.
Wow, beautiful.
Beautiful. I wanted to bring to attention the rebuild of Lahaina. And I just asked I'm quoting you, Garrett, per Maui Brewing Company, if you've come to Hawaii, or if you've thought about dreaming, if Hawaii meant something to you in a deep level, just $10 per person. And I have scoured and found the best fundraiser, 501(c)(3) they're going to go directly to rebuilding. And so that we're going to put the link here on the video and also put it down below in the description. And if you can't do $10, then $5. Could you imagine if thousands and thousands of people?
Because it's going directly to
the people.
Grassroots, boots on the ground.
Not to nothing, not that there's anything wrong with the government, but not to the government.
I think doing it this way you'll get it. People want to help. That's part of what it is to be a connected species. But often we, as part of that connected species, don't know how to help.
Yes.
So this is a portal that people will feel comfortable with doing.
Also, is there anything else that you want a message to them?
To basically, the simple words are, you're not alone. We are connected, and the pain is shared, and the journey to healing is shared as well. So the issue is not to feel marginalized and isolated. And first of all, Hawaii has always in its history because it's an island so far away. But it has such connections to so many of us on the mainland, and very positive connections. And travel is different than it was in the 50s and 60s. People come back and forth. So people are very aware of what's going on, and people are very touched with the tragedy. And basically, when tragedies happen, people don't know what to do to be helpful. That's part of the problem, because we have to think of it in polyvagal terms, because a tragedy is a signal of threat to us. And with threat, we either run away, run or fight, or we disappear. And when the tragedy becomes really severe, we become helpless. And the issue is, we need to be told how to be helpful, because it is helpful to us to be helpful to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
So Steve, if people are really interested in what you do you have any books? What's your website? Let us know how these guys can reach you.
Oh, okay. So they can contact, or at least get information on Polyvagal Theory from the Polyvagal Institute website. And in the end of September, the book that I've written with my son Seth, which is in a language that's accessible, will be available. It's called Our Polyvagal World: How Trauma and Safety, or Safety and Trauma Change Us.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. So we'd encourage anybody to get that book. We'll put a link. Contact. Go to the website. We'll put a link to your website as well. So,
okay,
Steve, thank you so much. Wow, it's a real honor to interview you. We're so grateful. I'm sure this will help a lot of people within the community in Maui and wider. So bless you and thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome. Listen, thank you for inviting me, and good luck to you and to your colleagues in Hawaii.